I never thought one phone call could change the way I saw everything. That was the moment it all began, when my world cracked open, quietly, like glass under pressure. I was 21, still clinging to the naive belief that love was enough to shield me from the chaos outside. My boyfriend, Daniel, was my anchor, steady, stubborn, someone who always made me feel like the world couldn't touch me. But in the summer of that year, everything turned into a test I wasn't ready for. It started with Ethan. Daniel had known him for years, a friend from his childhood who floated in and out of our lives with this strange mix of charm and recklessness. He was the kind of man who wore trouble like a second skin. To me, he was just a shadow on the edge of our relationship, until one night when he wasn't. The first time I felt something was wrong was when Daniel picked me up late in the evening, his face set hard, jaw tight, hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. He didn't say much at first. The car felt heavier than usual, the silence pressing down until I couldn't take it anymore. "What happened?" I asked softly, my hand brushing his arm. He didn't answer right away, just shook his head, his eyes fixed on the road. Finally, he muttered, "Ethan's in trouble again." Again. That word stuck. I didn't press him further because I knew how Daniel was. When he decided something was his responsibility, no one could pull him away from it. And Ethan had a way of turning his problems into everyone else's. But the days that followed were worse. Ethan wasn't just in trouble. He was dragging Daniel into the mess too. It was late, maybe past midnight, when my phone buzzed. Daniel's name lit up the screen, and when I answered, his voice was low rushed. "Stay inside tonight. Don't ask questions, just don't go anywhere." My heart dropped. "Daniel, what's going on?" A pause. I could hear noise in the background, men's voices, shuffling, the thud of something heavy. Then his voice again, sharper. "Promise me, please." I promised. What else could I do? But my chest was tight, my skin prickling with dread. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside my window made me jump. Every passing car felt like it was coming for us. The next morning, Daniel showed up at my apartment looking exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, a faint bruise on his cheekbone he tried to brush off as nothing. But his eyes told the truth. Something dangerous was happening, and Ethan was at the center of it. I tried to reach him, to break through the wall he was building around himself. "You can't fix everything for him, Daniel. He's going to drag you down with him." He looked at me, really looked at me, like he wanted to believe I was wrong. "He's my brother," he said quietly, though they weren't related by blood. "If I don't help him, who will?" That was Daniel, loyal to the point of self-destruction. And that loyalty was about to burn both of us. Things escalated fast. Strange cars started idling near my street. My phone rang from numbers I didn't recognize, men's voices asking for Daniel. Once, when I was walking home, I swore I saw someone following me, their shadow stretching too close behind mine. When I told Daniel, his expression darkened, but he said only, "I'll take care of it." Except he couldn't. Ethan's enemies were circling, and by extension, they were circling us. I felt it every time Daniel's phone lit up with a message he wouldn't show me. Every time he slipped out at night, whispering, "Don't wait up." The night that still haunts me came a week later. Daniel stormed into my apartment, his shirt streaked with dirt, knuckles raw, breathing like he'd been running for miles. I froze where I stood, my chest tightening. "What happened?" I whispered. He didn't answer, he just wrapped his arms around me, holding me so tightly it hurt. I could feel the tremor in his hands, the way his body shook against mine. When he finally pulled back, his voice cracked. "Promise me you trust me, no matter what." I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand answers. But instead, I nodded. Because in that moment, fear silenced me. Fear of what he'd say if I pushed. Fear of what we were already tangled in. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside me, I realized something with chilling clarity. This wasn't Ethan's story anymore. It was ours. And it was only just beginning. Fear doesn't always arrive like a scream. Sometimes it seeps in quietly, hiding in the spaces between breaths, until you realize it's the only thing keeping you awake at night. That was my life after Daniel's warning. Every day felt like a test of endurance, how much dread I could carry in my chest without breaking. I stopped walking alone after dark, double-checked the locks, and found myself flinching at ordinary sounds: the rumble of an engine outside, a knock on the door, footsteps in the hallway. I told myself I was paranoid. But paranoia doesn't leave bruises. Daniel was slipping further away from me, though he still swore he was protecting me. He disappeared at odd hours, came back with excuses that didn't fit, and I could feel the weight he carried pressing against both of us. I hated myself for the questions I never asked, for the truths I pretended not to see. One night, after another of his unexplained absences, I snapped. "You think I don't notice?" I shouted the moment he walked in. His shirt was damp with sweat, his knuckles raw again. "You think I don't see what this is doing to you, to us?" Daniel froze in the doorway, eyes hollow, shoulders tense. For a moment, I thought he'd yell back, but he just closed the door slowly, as if afraid of waking something lurking outside. "You don't understand," he said finally, his voice rough. "Then make me understand." My voice cracked with the weight of it. "Because right now it feels like you're lying to me every time you open your mouth." He turned away, running a hand over his face. I saw it then, the exhaustion, the guilt, the way he was fighting battles he couldn't admit to. When he finally spoke, his words were barely above a whisper. "They're watching us." My stomach dropped. "Who?" He shook his head, lips pressed tight as if naming them would make it worse. All he added was, "If they can't get to Ethan, they'll use me." "If they can't use me," his eyes flicked to me, and I understood without him finishing the sentence. Silence wrapped around us, heavy and suffocating. I felt the blood drain from my face. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just Daniel being reckless. This was survival. After that, I started keeping my phone on me at all times, waiting for calls I didn't want to answer. Ethan became a ghost in our conversations, always present but never named directly. When Daniel left, I stayed glued to the window, staring into the streetlights, wondering if one of the cars parked too long was waiting for me. A week later, I got proof. It was late evening when I stopped at the corner store. I tried to move quickly, head down, but as I walked back to my building, I felt it, the distinct pull of eyes on my back. My heart hammered, footsteps echoing behind mine. I sped up. So did they. By the time I reached my door, my hands were shaking so hard I fumbled with the key. I burst inside, slammed the lock, and pressed my back against the wood, trying to steady my breathing. That night, I couldn't keep it in. "Daniel," I whispered, lying beside him in the dark. "I think someone followed me." He stiffened instantly. I heard his breath hitch, felt the way his muscles tensed like he was ready for a fight. "This is exactly why I didn't want to tell you," he muttered, his hand covering his face. "You don't deserve this." "Then get us out," I said fiercely, surprising even myself. "I don't care what Ethan's done or who's after him. Just walk away." He turned to me, eyes glinting in the dim light. "It's not that simple. Once you're in, there's no walking away." The finality in his voice broke something inside me. I wanted to scream, to tear through the silence, but I couldn't. Instead, I cried quietly into the pillow, while Daniel lay beside me staring at the ceiling, as if calculating every possible way out of a maze with no exits. The next morning, he was gone again before I woke up. He left no note, no explanation, just the faint smell of smoke clinging to the sheets. My phone buzzed an hour later, an unknown number. My chest tightened as I answered. "Tell your boyfriend," a low voice said, calm and cold, "time's running out." The line went dead. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, phone clutched in my shaking hand. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. And in that moment, a terrifying thought struck me. They knew who I was. They knew how to reach me. That night, Daniel returned, face pale, eyes bloodshot. I confronted him with the call, my voice trembling. He didn't deny it. He just sat down heavily, his head in his hands. "They'll come after you if I don't fix this," he whispered. "And I don't know if I can fix this." I looked at him, my chest burning with anger and love and fear all at once. "Then tell me everything. Stop protecting me with lies, Daniel. I'd rather face the truth with you than live in this constant fear." He finally lifted his gaze, and in that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before in him: defeat. And I knew, with a cold certainty, that the storm we'd been pretending to outrun was about to break right over us. There's a moment when fear becomes a part of you, like a second heartbeat. You don't fight it anymore, you just live with it, waiting for the blow to land. That was me in the days that followed. I'd stopped pretending life was normal. I carried fear the way some people carry jewelry, always on me, always visible in the way my hands shook when I lit a cigarette or the way I startled at every knock on the door. Daniel had promised to tell me everything, but promises are fragile when danger presses in. He spoke in fragments, half-truths that gave me just enough to confirm my nightmares. Ethan owed money, serious money. Men who didn't forgive. Men who didn't forget. Daniel had tried to shield me, but by then, shielding was useless. The night it all came to a head started like any other, quiet, heavy, as though the walls themselves were bracing for impact. Daniel paced the apartment like a caged animal, checking the blinds every 5 minutes, muttering to himself. I tried to calm him, but my words slid off him like rain on glass. Finally, I grabbed his arm. "You're scaring me more than they are, Daniel. Talk to me." He stopped pacing, stared at me for a long, unbearable moment, then said the words I'd been dreading. They gave me a deadline. "Midnight tonight." My throat closed. "And if you don't, they'll come for me. For us." The room tilted. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Midnight wasn't some abstract threat, it was hours away. Time had become a ticking bomb, and we were sitting on top of it. "What do they want?" I whispered. He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. "Money. Blood. Ethan. Doesn't matter which, as long as someone pays." The silence that followed was suffocating. I looked at him, the man I loved, and saw him breaking under the weight of someone else's sins. And yet, even then, he tried to protect Ethan, like some twisted loyalty that would kill us both. I wanted to scream, to demand he choose me over his so-called brother. Instead, I whispered, "Then let's leave. Tonight. We don't owe them anything." His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, but then he shook his head. "You don't run from men like this. They'll follow. They'll always follow." We didn't realize how close they already were. It was nearly 11 when the pounding started, loud, deliberate, shaking the door in its frame. My heart stopped. Daniel froze, his eyes flicking to me with a look I'll never forget: resignation. "Stay here," he whispered, and moved toward the door. "Daniel," I grabbed his hand, but he pulled free, his jaw set. The pounding came again, followed by a voice that sliced through the air like a knife. "You know what time it is, Daniel. Open up." I pressed myself against the wall, every muscle screaming to run, though there was nowhere to go. Daniel opened the door a crack, just enough for me to glimpse 2 men in the hallway, broad shoulders, hard eyes, the kind of men who didn't knock for long. "We said midnight," one of them growled. "Looks like you're ready early." "I just need more time," Daniel said, his voice steady, though I could see the tremor in his hand gripping the doorknob. The man smirked. "Time's a luxury you don't have." His gaze flicked past Daniel and landed on me. His smile widened. "Pretty little thing you've got there. Be a shame if she had to pay your debt." My blood turned to ice. I stumbled back, shaking my head, but the look in his eyes told me it wasn't a bluff. Daniel moved fast, slammed the door shut, locked it, shoved a chair under the handle. He turned to me, his chest heaving. "They know you now," he said, voice breaking. "I can't keep you safe anymore." Tears burned my eyes. "Then what do we do?" He didn't answer. He just pulled me into his arms, holding me as though the world was ending, and maybe it was. The pounding grew louder. Wood splintered. The chair scraped against the floor. We both knew the door wouldn't hold much longer. I buried my face against his chest, heart racing, and for the first time, I realized we might not survive this. And then, just as the door finally gave way with a violent crack, Daniel whispered in my ear, words I couldn't make sense of until much later. "Forgive me." The door burst open. In that instant, the world shrank to the 2 of us and the chaos at the door. Everything else, past, future, even fear itself, disappeared. Only survival mattered. The men stormed inside, their shadows stretching across the walls like dark fingers. Daniel pushed me behind him, shielding me with his body as he tried to reason with them. I could see the anger and desperation etched into his face, the way he moved like every second counted. "You don't have to do this," he said, voice firm but trembling. "Take what you came for and leave." One of them laughed, a deep, cruel sound that made my skin crawl. "You think we're here for money?" he said. "We're here for lessons." Time slowed. I clutched Daniel's arm, nails digging in. My chest was tight, every instinct screamed to run, but there was no escape. He glanced at me, his eyes silent but saying everything. "Hold on. Don't let go." The men advanced, but before they could reach us, a sudden roar of engines outside froze them in place. Headlights cut through the darkness, and I recognized the cars almost immediately. Daniel's friends, people who had been quietly following instructions we didn't even understand. Chaos erupted. Shouts, tires screeching, the clatter of objects being overturned. The intruders hesitated just long enough for Daniel to push me toward the side door. "Go," he shouted. I ran without thinking, legs burning, lungs screaming, as Daniel confronted them, buying me time. Behind me, I heard the clash of bodies, the sharp cracks of something hitting metal, then the thud of someone hitting the floor. Fear tore through me, but adrenaline carried me forward. I stumbled into the night, swallowed by the darkness, and didn't stop until I reached the safety of the waiting cars. Friends grabbed me, pulling me in, wrapping me in blankets, asking questions I couldn't answer. All I could do was shake, tears streaming, body trembling. Hours later, after the police arrived and the scene was finally under control, I was sitting on the curb, wrapped in a coat, watching Daniel being led away in a different direction. He caught my eye for a split second, gave a nod, and then disappeared into the chaos of flashing lights and sirens. The weeks that followed were a blur. Statements, police interviews, court dates. The men were arrested. Daniel was cleared of wrongdoing, but the damage was done. My trust, my sense of safety, my world, it had all been fractured. Yet, in the aftermath, something strange happened. I realized I had survived. I was still standing. Daniel, despite everything, had protected me in the only way he could. And I had faced fear head-on, without turning away, without surrendering. I moved into a small apartment of my own, a place where I could lock the doors and breathe freely. Daniel and I didn't speak for months. Sometimes I wondered if I'd see him again, if I'd even want to. But then one night, a knock came at my door. My heart leapt into my throat, and for a terrifying second, I thought it was him, or worse, them. I looked through the peephole and saw Daniel unarmed, his face pale but calm. "I'm done running," he said softly when I opened the door. "I want to make this right with you, if you'll let me." I studied him, the lines of exhaustion and guilt carved into his face, the sincerity in his eyes. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than fear, hope. We sat and talked for hours that night. Not about the past, not about blame, but about what came next. About rebuilding, carefully, slowly, brick by brick. About choosing to protect one another without letting the shadows of others control our lives. I learned that survival isn't about never being afraid. It's about facing fear, even when it makes your knees weak and your chest ache. It's about standing, refusing to be broken, and deciding who gets to share your life, not who forces themselves into it. Daniel and I, we're still figuring it out. The world hasn't become safer and fear hasn't disappeared, but I know now that I am stronger than I ever realized. And for the first time, I truly believe that love, real love, doesn't demand silence, it doesn't demand sacrifice of your dignity, and it certainly doesn't come with threats or terror. Some nights, when the wind rattles the windows and shadows creep along the walls, I still hear the echo of that night, the pounding, the voices, the fear. But I breathe through it. I survived. And I am not letting it define me. Because in the end, the choice was mine all along. And I chose to live.